So talk to us about the state of affairs when pertaining to Israel at both Harvard and Columbia before 10/7.
The situation at Harvard is far worse than people think. I can talk about the Israeli student who was asked to leave class because her nationality made other people uncomfortable. I could talk about the Jewish student who was physically assaulted at Harvard Business School. I could talk about the Jewish student who was spat on for wearing a kippah. I could talk about the staff member who challenged me to debate him as to whether Jews were behind 9/11 and then threatened me with a machete. I could talk about the private armed security outside my house, and I could talk about the countless death threats. But I think the most fundamental part is really twofold. Number one, this is not simply an attack on Jewish people. This is an attack on the United States, and Jews are in the way. We are the canary in the coal mine, and there is a societal ill that is anti-religious, that is anti-God, and that is certainly anti-Israel. And that pervasive and systemic nature of anti-Semitism and anti-religion is all over the university, and it is a damning indictment on the state of higher education that in order for students to receive equity and justice and equality, we have to resort to the court of law. So I'll just say very quickly, and then I'll stop talking. I lived for 3 years in the old city of Jerusalem. I lived 2 minutes away from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Dome of the Rock, and the Western Wall. I came to Harvard because I wanted to study that religious enthusiasm I had from a pluralistic perspective. I'm a religious Jew, meaning I don't use electronics on the Sabbath. For the first time in my life, I broke that on the night of October 7th. My rabbi told me, use your phone. Find out if your siblings in Israel are okay or not. As I was doing that, 1,000 students and professors published a statement that blamed Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, the night of October 7th. So being here and being in a room with people who believe in Jewish values, in American values, in our shared destiny in the land of Israel is so appreciated and so moving. And so thank you, thank you. Your prayers are felt, and they work, and they're real.
Yeah, you know, I always say that before October 7th, I felt like a Columbia student that was also Jewish. I've always been deeply connected to my Jewish faith. It's been a huge part of my identity, but I never felt like it was a defining characteristic in terms of how other people saw me. After October 7th, I felt like I was received by many of my peers and professors as a Jewish Columbia student. And I think that difference is really stark and kind of goes to show you how things shifted after October 7th, because the anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism that was bubbling was below the surface. And October 7th opened the floodgates completely on Columbia's campuses and on campuses across the country and even across the world. And so that was really difficult on sort of just a personal human level. I don't think people talk about the fact that all of your relationships are affected. You lose people that you thought were good friends. You can no longer sort of openly express the beliefs that you hold in some of your classes for fear of retaliation from professors. And this isn't just Jewish students. These are Christian students, like many of you in this room, who are also pro-Israel and Zionists and believe in God. And it is just so ridiculous to me that on campuses in America that purport to champion free speech, that free speech doesn't really apply to us. And that was brewing at Columbia before October 7th. And the Hamas's attack on Israel really brought everything to the surface. And I think the moment I really realized how bad things would get was on October 8th. I was meeting a group of friends on campus to go down to a pro-Israel rally by the United Stations. Columbia's in New York City, so we have a campus, but also New York City is our campus. And so as we were meeting to take the subway downtown, we saw a group of dozens of students with Palestinian flags and signs that read, "Long live the resistance, resistance is justified, resistance by any means necessary." And at this point, many of us still hadn't heard back from our loved ones. We didn't know how many Israelis had been taken hostage, how many people had been killed. The bodies of some of our loved ones were still warm. And these are the people I study with, I eat in the dining halls with, I'm learning with every single day, and they were justifying this attack on October 8th. And then after that, things kind of went into an accelerating downward spiral, and things ultimately turned out how they did in the spring.
So if you can speak to that, if you can speak about the encampment at Columbia, your feelings, your fellow Jewish students, pro-Israel students, and what that period was like for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the encampment was colorized by these scenes of what I can only describe as lynch mobs. We saw flare guns, we saw the burning of American flags, of signs reading, glory to the Intifada, honor the martyrs, resist, like I said, by any means necessary. But no one really talked about what happened sort of behind the scenes. And that was students completely isolating Jewish students, professors teaching from within the encampment that didn't allow Jewish and pro-Israel students to enter, and then this sort of new wave of online vitriol, death threats, the likes that Shabbos described. But what's really behind all of it is this anti-Americanism. And anti-Semitism and the anti-Israel rhetoric that we saw was a front for this deeply anti-Western, deeply Judeo-Christian sentiment that is plaguing my university and so many others. And so while we saw these really terrifying scenes and friends of mine were assaulted, a friend of mine had rocks thrown at him, he had his American flag stolen and set on fire. The campus rabbi was followed off campus by people telling him to go back to Poland and to burn Tel Aviv to the ground. What's behind that isn't just about Jews and it's about Israel, and it's, not just about Israel, but it is about this deeply, deeply anti-American and anti-Western set of values that threaten all of us.
Thank you. Shabbos, talk to us about the lawsuit and why you feel Harvard should be held accountable.
Yeah, okay, this is like my favorite thing to talk about. So we filed a lawsuit not because we wanted to, but because we felt like we had to. We didn't feel that Harvard was either willing or able to combat anti-Semitism. And by the way, the reason I know that is we are now 9 months after the fact. If Harvard wanted to combat anti-Semitism, they literally would have done it already. The amount of bad publicity, the amount of donors who've pulled out, the amount of congressional investigations, but they still refuse, for whatever irrational reason it is, to do anything to protect their Jewish students and to do anything to protect the values of Veritas, which is their school logo of truth. So we filed the lawsuit in federal court. What the Trump administration did was reclassify Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, recognizing that Judaism is not merely a religion, but it's also an ethnicity. And therefore, institutions are not allowed to discriminate based on national origin, which characterizes Judaism. So we have made, yeah, you could clap for that. By the way, just a fun fact. I wanted to say that at the RNC speech, but I had to cut it out for time. But it's a really good point. What was I saying? So we believe, and you can all read our lawsuit, it's publicly available online, that Harvard is in gross violation of their federal obligations under the law to protect Jewish students. They are violating the Civil Rights Act every single day. Every student that does not feel safe on campus, every death threat, every staff member who's challenging a Jewish person to debate whether Jews were behind 9/11, that is a moral failure and a stain on Harvard's institution. And I know we're running out of time, so I'll say this super quickly. The fact that in order to receive, as I mentioned, this equity is through the court of law, demonstrates that these universities are unfortunately not our allies. And I am working in my personal capacity, and I'm sure there are many of you doing this as well, in the United States Congress, with those with political and religious influence. The American taxpayer should not be on the hook, should not be subsidizing and paying for anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism on its campus. That should not be controversial.
Not in this crowd. It is not controversial, but apparently it was during the congressional hearings held earlier this year. So could you talk to us about your experience testifying before Congress?
Yeah, so I hope it's appropriate for me to say I'm single, but when I go on dates, my pickup line is that I testified in front of Congress, which is like a very cool pickup line. I'm still single, but maybe in another testimony it'll work. So, you know, Eden and I, don't tell my mom I said that. Eden and I were students. We were thrust into this. I'd like to think we're somewhat okay at it now, but we didn't know what we were doing. Testifying in front of Congress, going on national media, speaking at a Republican convention. We're just students. We're good at studying. We're good at learning in the libraries. But we were given this opportunity first at the House Education Committee, led by the incredible Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, and then later at the, yeah, you can clap for her. She's amazing. And then a couple months later, I was asked to testify at the House Judiciary Committee, and then I met with the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Jason Smith, and it's incredibly surreal. I'm a first-generation American. My dad moved here. He was born in Japan, grew up in England, and he came to the United States 30 years ago to chase the American dream, literally. He started a small business, and he is shocked and disgusted. He dropped out of high school when he was 16, to think that he was so excited when his son got into Harvard and to see what that's turned out to be. So I thought it was incredibly historic and deeply personal and moving that I was now testifying in the United States Congress in the halls of power. My great aunt, may she be alive and well, she's a survivor of Kristallnacht, and she can tell you that Kristallnacht did not begin with the burning of books, with deportations, with broken glass. It began with the acceptance, the normalization, and the celebration of Jew hatred, and that is exactly what we are seeing at our campuses, and that is what I will continue to speak out against on every single venue, on every single platform, and we will combat this together. We are in this fight together.
Eden, how was the experience for you?
Like Shabbos said, I'm actually a first-generation American as well. My parents fled religious persecution in Iran, and thank God for this great country that took them in and gave them the opportunity to build a life here free from religious persecution. And so to be sitting before the United States Congress speaking about that same Jew hatred that drove my family from Iran to the United States was chilling, but very empowering to know that where it matters, people have our back. And that's exactly how I feel sitting in this room. This year has been, yeah, seriously. You know, this year has been traumatizing, in all honesty, because it feels like we are alone. But then we come to spaces like this, and we know that this is really where America stands, and that the people terrorizing our college campuses and burning American flags and desecrating our value system are a very small yet vocal minority. And this is who America is, and this is what we believe. And so to know that we will continue to fight and that we have the majority of the United States Congress standing with us, to me, is more important than any anti-Israel lecturer or any anti-Israel protester on any Ivy League university in this country.
Well, I want to thank you both for all that you have done and all that you will continue to do. This is not how you should have to spend your college experience, and really want to thank you on behalf of CUFI, behalf of the Jewish community, for really being a menches. Menches, like an almost indescribable Yiddish word of just like upstanding, beautiful citizens. And kol hakavod, todah. Thank you.